before we actually turned the cameras on, we were chatting. So I guess explain. So what do you do? I mean, if you had to simplify it, what do you do?
Well, I work in the residential property management industry. I manage apartment communities. I work for a private owner these days. I come from the larger aspect of the industry, where I used to come from working at the large national or statewide organizations, managing the large 400, 500 unit apartment communities in the large metropolitan cities. And these days I work for a small private owner up in a rural area in Wisconsin, managing a 136 unit apartment community where I oversee the operations at the community. We have a large, I'm sorry, we have maintenance
Move
crew.
the mic up just a little bit. Like fist away. There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
So we have a maintenance crew and a housekeeping crew, and then myself in the leasing office, the management office at the apartment community.
Sweet. Because I know one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. I know we chatted about this off camera before we got the cameras rolling,
Yeah.
but you've got so much experience working in the real estate's a hot button topic. There's a lot of people talking about it, but I think one of the big things that kind of falls through with a lot of the people is you don't have a whole lot of people that actually they want to get into it, but they don't know how to stay in it. Like it's great. It's easy
Right.
to go buy a property, sign on the
Right.
dotted line. What happens after that point? Because you've got a real human being living inside that building.
Right, and there's a lot of education out there for you, kind of getting from that point to, okay, now you've signed up the papers, and now you own the place, and they've given you the keys to that 8 unit apartment building, and there's a lot of training and education getting you up to that point. There's investors out there that that have done this themselves. They've purchased properties and they own their their 8 unit apartment buildings or their duplexes or whatever, and they want to teach the small landlords how they did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I say they did it means they had went through the process of purchasing their first place, and now they're up to buying many more places, right? What I do is I kind of take the ball from there and show them the operations of it, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and how we teach our staff over at that larger end of the industry. So as we were talking earlier, I use an analogy a lot about our industry of renting apartments is very similar to the automobile sales industry. And meaning, what I mean by that is that when you go buy a car, there are three primary ways that you're going to go purchase that you could go purchase that automobile.
Mm-hmm.
There is that guy that will put his car in the driveway and put a for sale sign on it. And he will put an ad on Craigslist, and he'll put an ad in the newspaper, and so on. He will sell that car and then take the proceeds of that and go get another car, fix that up, and go do this process over and over again. And he's been doing this for 30 or 40 or 50 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then
Yeah.
you got those guys that the what I call the Bob's Auto Sales guys, the Joe's Auto Sales guys, and these are those mom and pop local small dealerships in your town, right? And and the landlords out there, the most of them that are online, on, let's say, on YouTube or on these websites, are what I would call what a Bob's Auto Sales, that kind of teaches Joe at Joe's Auto Sales how Bob does things at a Bob's Auto Sales, or teaches that guy that puts his car in the driveway and puts his for sale sign on it,
Yeah.
if you will. I come from, if you kind of stick with that analogy, I come from that Toyota and Chrysler side of the industry, the larger companies, the bigger organizations, where we have more of a stringent training program that we put our associates through, right? And there's a lot of things that you learn in that side of the industry right away, immediately, right off the bat. And one of the things I hear a lot of small landlords, they talk about, is, I've owned my apartment buildings for 40 years or 50 years. And in that side of the industry, that means a lot, because as a small landlord that owns that Bob's Auto Sales or that 8 unit apartment building or that small management company, I always tell them, you guys learn things in your side of the business through what I describe as over the continuum of time. Okay, in other words, the longer you've owned your duplex, the more information you've gotten time to gather, and you've learned, right? You learn through experience and so on.
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily how things work on the side of the industry where I come from, on that Toyota and Chrysler side of the business, if you will. in other words, they're not going to wait until you've been there for a year and a half and then teach you, you shouldn't say this or you shouldn't say that, right?
Mhm.
There, if I was to look at some mom and pop small landlord and I said, give me an example of something that you're not supposed to say to people, and they'll inevitably say, well, we're not supposed to tell them, whatever, they say, and I said, now, whatever that was that you've just told me, how many years from the time that you first bought your first property up until when you learned that, how much time was that? Did it go something like this? Did you purchase that property and the real estate broker turned around and gave you the keys to that apartment building and said, well, congratulations, you're now the owner of that first duplex. And oh, before I give this to you, I'm going to tell you, you're not supposed to say this to people, right? Well, of course that
Mhm.
didn't, right?
Yeah.
So I said, and then I said, so let's be realistic. When did you learn that? Was that the following day, next week, 3 months later, a year later, whatever it
Mhm.
was, right? Now, and they say, well, maybe about a year and a half after I owned my property, I finally learned that. Okay. And that's normal. That's typical. Most landlords learn
Mhm.
things like that, like, you shouldn't say this to people or whatever, right? They'll learn that maybe a year and a half after they first own their first property, right?
Mhm.
Let's go over into my side of the business where I come from. Okay. Imagine today's your first day on the job working as a leasing consultant. You just started working at this 400 unit apartment community. We're now going to fast forward the clock 18 months now. It's a year and a half later. Today's your 18-month anniversary working as a leasing agent over here. You're at the front desk and you're working with some prospective tenant or some current resident. Okay.
Mhm.
The property manager and assistant manager are standing in back of you there and they're listening to you talk to this person. And the assistant manager looks to the property manager and says, you know, she's been here now for a year and a half. Do you think we should tell her now that she's not supposed to say that to people? Of course not, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that's not going to, right? That wouldn't happen. So then I asked him, so when do you think you learned that over in my side of the business? Right. Right.
Mhm.
Right. That's your first day on the job. So the difference being where, they would toss the keys at you and go, okay, Mark, good luck at everything and happy renting. And you kind of go along your way and you kind of wiggle your way through things and learn stuff as you go along. Right.
Mhm.
In my side of the industry where I come from, today's your first day on the job. They're not going to let you say hello to anybody that walks in that door
Mhm.
until you know what you can and cannot say to people. In other words, you're going to learn more in your first 30 minutes of working at that place, okay,
Yeah.
than you will in 30 years of owning your own
And
duplex.
just to clarify for people that don't know, when it comes to renting out a property or showing a property, there's a lot of government regulations,
Sure.
and in addition to just things that can be improved, because one of the things that I think especially with the analogy you use, like Bob's Auto versus selling a car, if you're selling one car every 6 months or 3 months or 2 months or even one car a month,
Mhm.
you don't get the opportunity to learn as much or to actually encounter as many situations as if you're selling, and with your analogy, 400 cars a year.
Mhm.
Like, it's one thing to manage 12 properties, maybe work with 20 tenants a year.
Mhm.
You get to see a lot, you get to learn a lot. But if you're dealing with 4 or 500,
Sure. Yeah.
and the other thing is, when you look at like 5% of that 20, that's four people.
Yeah.
That's not drastic. When you
Right.
look at, if you got a problem, if you can make it 5% more efficient, or if you've got a problem with 5% of people
Right.
at a place that you're managing 400 and some
Mhm.
properties or 400 some units,
Yeah.
holy shit.
Well, but I'll kind of counter that in a sense in a little bit that I've seen mom and pop landlords
Hmm.
who've gotten big enough to the point where they now own 300 units or 400
Hmm.
units, and but they've never come from the other side of the industry, so they've really never been taught that.
Mm.
So you grow that to be that big eventually over the
Hmm.
years, but you still don't have that side of the industry. So, what it's when I teach landlords, the my teaching and the stuff that I teach them, one of the things I explain to them has nothing to do with the amount of years I've been doing this. So
Hmm.
I've been in the industry right now close to 30 years. I've been in the business, but that's irrelevant to any of this. When I try to when I talk to landlords, a lot of times they try to stress how many years they've owned their apartment buildings, and
Hmm.
yes, that's important. You've been doing this a long time and you've gained a lot of experience in that. The side of the business where I come from, my 30 years of doing this doesn't mean anything to them. That doesn't
Hmm.
really, because so when I would teach them stuff, one of the things I kind of try to explain to them is that the things that I teach, you could go over to my side of the business and find some leasing consultant over there that's been in the business for 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
That gal could stand there and teach the same things I do.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so, because this isn't stuff that I learned over the years, like
Mm-hmm.
it would be from a Bob's Auto Sales guy. A lot of the stuff that I teach is things that they will train you on immediately right away, your first day on the job. They won't let you talk to anybody until you know these things.
Mm-hmm.
That's but that's kind of also how important they find this stuff. They're very anal about making sure that you don't do things a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my thought is, if Toyota and Chrysler and Ford and Honda and GM and Audi and Lexus all find this stuff so stinking important that they make sure that they teach their associates this stuff right away.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Bob's Auto Sales not doing this? Right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I use that analogy with the companies I come from versus these small landlords. There's a lot of things these small landlords are not doing, or they are doing,
Mm-hmm.
that we're taught don't ever do those things.
Yeah, but I think unfortunately you get to a certain point, you're doing something for so many years, and I'm not condoning it, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's a lot of the
Sure.
mindset, which I think.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
you still got that drive.
Right.
That's something
Well,
that's really
okay.
cool.
So one thing you'll learn about me when I teach is I use a lot of analogies when I teach to kind of help make my point. If you haven't caught on to that yet, okay.
Couldn't
So
tell.
okay. So here's another analogy I use. Okay. If you're driving down the highway and you're going 20 miles an hour over the speed limit, there's a good chance you're going to get pulled over and get a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. Now, take that same guy driving, but now go out into some small town out in the middle of nowhere, and you're going to go driving 20 miles an hour on some dirt road out in the middle of nowhere. What's the chance that you're going to get pulled over and get a ticket? Probably slim to none. So you could be driving up and down the highway or up and down that dirt road for many years, going that speed.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you haven't been pulled over and getting a ticket, don't conflate that with that. Well, then that must be the speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, So, so I, when I, sometimes I'll talk to them and say, yeah, okay, you've been doing it that way, and you may have not gotten slapped on the hand for it that way. And there's no law that says that you shouldn't be, you can't do it that way, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But where I come from, they teach us you should never be doing that kind of stuff. Okay. And it's
Yeah.
just, and so I don't really necessarily teach the legal and law and say this is the speed limit stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but rather that I kind of give the
Sounds like the mindset.
the illustration of, if I did that where I come from,
Mm-hmm.
I'd get pulled over immediately and give it a ticket. So you may be going 20 miles an hour, where you are in that dirt road out in the middle of nowhere. The fact that you haven't been pulled over and given a ticket, don't conflate that with you must be going the speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Okay. So I will kind of teach on from that side of things.
So I guess jumping into that though, because one of the things I know this about you, but you started out in Milwaukee.
Yes.
So, like, explain what exactly you came from, because I think it's pretty damn cool.
So I started in. So I came from the industry. I came into this business right out of college. You wouldn't be able to tell by looking at me now, but prior to me being in this industry, in my previous life, I used to work as a personal fitness trainer.
No shit.
Yes, yeah. Like I said, you wouldn't tell by looking at me now, but
You,
back
you,
when
you do have a gym in your apartment, so I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
I was always wondering when we went in there and checked it out. It was super cool the way you had it staged. And I look, there's a whole room dedicated to a gym. I'm like, I don't get this, and this
Yeah.
pulls it together. Okay.
Yeah. So I used to, back in the day, this is back in the early 90s when I was in college, I used to work at health clubs. I started off as a fitness instructor, just doing orientations with people, showing them machines and stuff like that. And then later on, I got into becoming a certified personal trainer, and worked at a few different health clubs in the Metro Milwaukee area. And
No kidding.
But so how all this kind of got started, a long story, was when I first got certified as a personal trainer, my buddy and I both got certified at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, and we were having a hard time trying to get clients and getting our feet off the ground with this. And he had the idea of, well, why don't we take our stuff and and go and train people in their houses, in their basement. People have, little
Hmm.
equipment in their basements and stuff like that. And I thought, I like where you're going with this. I like
Hmm.
the idea, because let's get out of the, we're stuck at this health club
Yeah.
and at Vic Tanny or at the YMCA and so on, and working at these health clubs. And let's go and train people at their homes. But I didn't want to go driving around from town to town and go, I've got a client over on this side of town and a
Hmm.
client over on that side of town. Spend half my day driving all the way around the city, going to appointments all day long.
Hmm.
But I had heard that, I just somehow, I don't know how I figured this out, but I had heard that there were these big apartment places that had swimming pools and fitness centers and stuff
Yeah.
like that in them, and exercise rooms. I thought, okay, well, you go ahead and do that. You do that in people's houses. I'm going to go put my information together and make a flyer and put my business plan together and everything. And I'm going to go get in touch with these big apartment places in the Metro Milwaukee area and see if anyone would let me, do
Hmm.
little training sessions in their fitness center with their people that live there, right? And
Smart.
so, and in doing so, I would go walk into these offices and hand it to the leasing agents or the management staff there. And it always looked like they were having such a good time. They were having so much fun at these places. And I always told myself, if I ever get out of the fitness industry, this is back when I was in college,
Hmm.
I said, this is what I want to do.
Where are you going to college for?
I was for business management.
Okay.
I got where my associate's degree was in business management and or business administration, and then my bachelor's was in human resources.
Hmm.
So I had, and then left college and got right into this business. But so was getting out of college, and my dad was basically saying, okay, you have to get on your own now. It's your
Hmm.
school's done. Go find your own place to live now and everything. And personal training was okay, but it was too sporadic. It wasn't really making a living for me. Right.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, well, I got I wanted to make that my thing
Hmm.
for my life, but it was okay. Now it's Plan B. So now I went and grabbed the latest and greatest For Rent magazine, which is the rental booklet in the grocery stores for all the apartment communities in the area. And this time I went and sent them my resume to try to get in as a leasing agent.
Hmm.
And by the grace of God, I got into one of the ones that I really liked most, because they had a huge fitness center in there,
Yeah.
and it was a lot of amenities in that. And got in there as a leasing consultant, and the rest is history. I've been doing this ever since.
So how many units was that in the first
That
place?
was 475 units.
So the first place that you went.
Worked at as a leasing consultant, as an entry level leasing agent, was 475 units. There was myself, another part time leasing agent in the office, another full time leasing agent in the office, and then the assistant property manager and a property manager in the office. So there were 5 of us that worked in the leasing office in there.
Wow.
So
Sounds like a big operation.
they are there, and there, it was a fun idea, and I was there for close to 5 years at that my first place, and then from there I went hopping around from different properties after a couple of years here and a couple of years there, and
Yeah, but I got to jump back though. I mean, even just in the tactic of when you were a personal trainer going and finding the apartment buildings that had the fitness centers,
yeah,
that's smart. Because
yes,
I see that with a lot of business owners and a lot of people who are like, well, we could go for this person. It's like, and like your buddy did, he's like, well, I can go target this person. I'm going to go knocking doors. It's like, okay. And you go right to
yeah,
the big ones and you're like, okay, you've got the opportunity to hit, in cases like that, 475 different people
yeah,
all through
yeah,
knocking on one door.
hmm,
And it's, I mean, that I think that's something that's lost today. And that's something that definitely makes it stands out,
yeah,
because you look at a lot of people, they want to trudge through, they want to just keep going, but they don't realize that there's different ways to do things. And if you
hmm,
were to target the right clientele or to target the right person, it's so much easier.
yeah,
I mean, how much work did you put in versus your buddy putting in doing that?
sure, yeah, 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 yeah. But it got me into this industry, so
Yeah.
it kind of drove me into this little bit of a different direction, So it was, I didn't stick into that industry, but it introduced me to this, and I've been in this business ever since.
Hmm.
I said, so I help out these days small landlords and those that when we get out of the industry, we call ourselves recovering property managers. So it's, but so I and because there's a lot, there's a lot of stress on that side of the industry, but there was a lot of joy in training the leasing agents when they would come into in the business over there,
Hmm.
and I would love watching them grow in the business and getting as excited about the industry as much as I did when I first came into the business. Um,
Hmm.
and it was a rare find when you found someone that would get excited about the industry like that, because there's a lot of turnover
Hmm.
over there in that side of the business. There's a lot of, they'll get into the industry and they think it's just a lot of big fun sales, like you're selling furniture, or
Yeah.
you're going to sell cars or whatever, and then they find out there's a lot more to this than there really is just that. And then they and some of them just they find out it's really just not for them. And so there's a lot of turnover
Yeah.
in that end of the business.
Well, but I could see that. I mean, because you got to look at you're selling an essential.
Yeah.
At least from my perspective, you're
Mhm.
selling an essential, and you're also selling something that this is the place that they work their ass off all day. They hate their job. They may be whatever happens. This is their sanctuary. This is their place that they come back to every single. They wake up to in
Mhm.
the morning. They come back home to at night.
Yeah.
It's a whole different beast than going to buy a piece of furniture. Oh yeah, this couch is great. Couch may be great. The couch may suck. It's not going to make or break your day. Having a bad place.
Yeah.
I remember I was staying at a place down in Indiana when I was working down in Fort Wayne. There was a it was a place called I won't say the name, but it sucked. We got in there. Everything it was really old construction. I mean, things were kind of starting to break down, but the water just wouldn't start turning off,
Mm.
and it just kept going. And we kept getting stuck with the water bill, and I'm like, man, I said this place sucks. I go into work, and I'm like, man, I've got this problem. And one of the guys looks at me. He's like, wait, where are you staying? He's like, oh, I stay there too. He's like,
Mm.
we just got done with an ant
Oh
infestation,
yeah.
and we
Yeah.
had water dripping through the walls.
Mhm. Yeah.
But no, I mean, at the end of the day, like that means so much more to someone. And like you said, it comes much more down to the subtleties because it's a more important
Mhm.
piece of their life as opposed to a car, a brand new
Right.
musical instrument,
Yeah.
these microphones. Like it's not going to make or break anything, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. Yeah,
It-
and like you just put that example out there, maintenance is such a huge issue that is going to really make or break your place. I mean, the majority of the success of the properties I would come from um, are the places that had really good maintenance crews. The places that were not very good successes, we always had kind of maintenance guys that just didn't want to do the heavy lifting, if you
mhm.
will, and and so we and where I am now, it was a lot. The maintenance crew our maintenance director here has been with us for many years. He's been here before me,
Mhm.
and he's a jack of all trades, knows a lot of everything, and he's very willing to pick up and do whatever needs to get done. You know, um, it, that's it's a very hard. Yeah, commodity to find in
Mhm.
your maintenance crew. And when you got that good maintenance crew, it makes or breaks that property. It can really make or break everything. So a lot of those properties that you're talking about, it all comes down to that maintenance, but a lot of it is just the organization too. I mean, they
Mhm.
had so he's been here before me, but they just didn't have a lot of that organization. They didn't have that structure.
Mhm.
And when I came here, we combined my structure of working at that Toyota side of the business with his grit and knowledge of everything, and it's made our place just a uber success.
Hmm. So the maintenance, so because I know there's two trains of thought. I mean, you've got the mom and pop places. A lot of them they buy as fixer uppers. They grab them, they put them together themselves. They build or they kind of fix it up. They repair it. They get into a position where they can rent it out, but then they maintain it themselves. They're doing a lot of the handyman work themselves,
Yeah.
and they've just got a contractor's license through whatever city they're in, or and it's what do you see as I guess what explain the differences because you've got a unique perspective where I mean at least my background when it comes to real estate I do a little bit in the acquisition but I also am involved in some of the residential stuff but on a much smaller scale. What do you like what are your thoughts on the mom and pop like managing doing all the maintenance yourself versus bringing someone in and then even at that middle point where it's like you should consider looking into it.
Yeah, when you're saying bringing somebody in, you're saying to do the maintenance?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it depends on what your skill level has a
Hmm.
mom and pop. If you're going to buy an 8-unit apartment building, hopefully you're doing so with I mean, a lot of these guys, typically, most of them do so with the understanding that they've got a big skill level when it comes to maintenance. A lot of these
Hmm.
guys are fix-it guys themselves, so if they're not, that's one of the reasons I don't get into that side of things. I would never be able to own an 8-unit apartment building myself
Hmm.
because, I would never be able to do it, a lot. I would never be able to do what those guys do because I couldn't get, as much as here we are talking about my background and what I teach landlords on
Hmm.
that side of the industry. You know, there's an old saying: "A wise man knows what he knows, but also understands that he doesn't know everything." Right? And
Hmm.
I couldn't, and to get him to understand where I, you know, where my knowledge and understanding stops. I couldn't tell you the difference between a hammer and a screwdriver. Okay, so you know, and that's how inept I am when it comes to maintenance. You know,
Hmm.
so with that, I understand my limitations, and therefore, I would never in a million years go buy a duplex because I
Yeah.
could never do that kind of stuff. I would Someone would call and say, you know, my light bulb was burnt out. I wouldn't know the first thing how to do, how to unscrew that
Hmm.
thing and put a new one in. You know, and that's and so you know, with a lot of those guys, they're good at what they do because a lot of what take make or I should say what creates you to be successful and is doing that is those fixer uppers that you're talking about is you got to be able to know how to fix things, right? That's in the word fix is in the word
Hmm.
fixer upper, right? You know,
Yeah.
I would never be able to do that. So them being with a background in maintenance and handyman kind of background, it's a perfect
Hmm.
avenue for them to get into.
Yeah, but the hard part I see is I look at a lot of these people once they start to get up there in age, and it's like it's because it's business at the end of the day.
Yes, yeah.
Whether it be you make the best burger in town and this burger is just so good and everyone loves it and it's your legacy, it's what you're known
Mhm.
for.
Yeah,
It's the same thing in the real estate game, and I look at a lot of these people hang on to it, but to make a burger versus hiring someone else saying, "Listen, here's the recipe. We're gonna throw the hamburger on here. It's a
sure.
certain kind of patty. You do it a certain way." And
Well,
now you try to do the real estate thing, and
well,
yeah.
okay. So if you're talking, we're still on that on the loop of the maintenance side of things. You know, if you're a
Hmm.
guy that you're a handyman and you're a fix it guy, and you get into owning a duplex or an 8 unit apartment building, a huge part of your success is going to be because of your background in maintenance. Once you get,
Hmm.
as you just mentioned, once you get up to that point where you're getting an age and you know your back's hurting and you're not able to do that, hopefully by then you've been able to take people under your wing
Hmm.
over the last number of years that's going to kind of take over that side of things by now. You know, when you're 90 years, 80 years old,
Hmm.
you know, you've got your son, you know, your sons or whatever that will kind of, you've hopefully taught them that maintenance side of things and they'll be able to take over that end of things. Now,
We're gonna adopt a baby from Arizona,
yeah,
bring him up, and
yeah, yeah.
he's the heir.
Uh-huh. You know, but so hopefully you'll have that part of it. Where they're still going to be lacking is some of that other stuff that they don't even realize the training is out there, which is
Hmm.
the administrative and kind of the day-to-day operations, or not even day-to-day, but month-to-month operations of these
Hmm.
things, and things that we taught stuff that I train, which is what we train our leasing agents on. We out safety protocol when showing apartments. Um,
Explain that for a second.
so okay, so I mean, there's a number of things that they teach us, you know, and a lot of things that just these mom and pop landlords don't really think of. So some real obvious. We'll start with.
Hmm.
I always start with the real obvious one. Okay, number one, you don't ever show apartments after dark.
Hmm.
Okay, now in my fair housing segment of things, you know, one of the things I try to teach them is when you do something like that, make sure you don't just say we don't show apartments after dark, because again, that is not now dark is subjective.
Hmm.
Okay, so what do you mean by dark? So you need to make sure that you're going to set a time and say, okay, at this time of the year, we're going to stop showing apartments at 4:45. Okay, and then you change that every week based on how when it's going to start to get dark or it's going to get lighter
Hmm.
later, and so you document that. It's one of the biggest things that teaches documentation as to when you changed your showing time. So this
Hmm.
week we're going to start showing at 4:45. Next week we're going to stop showing at 4:25. You know, because it's going to get darker a little bit sooner or so on. That means okay, it's 4:25. You don't show apartments now for that. If it's 4:27 or 4:28, and Grandma Ethel comes walking in and says, "I want to go see an apartment," you know, it's Grandma Ethel now,
Yeah,
right? Well,
exactly.
90% of these Bob's Auto Sales guys, right, are thinking, "Well, it's
Hmm.
Grandma Ethel. Well, come, whatever. I'll go show her,"
Yeah.
right? Again, now that's you know one of the things I try to tell them is there are so many of these things, these business practices that they do at the Bob's Auto Sales guys or at the guy putting his car in the driveway, putting the for sale sign on it, that they do that if I ever did that at Toyota or Chrysler,
Hmm.
they would snap my head off. You know,
Yeah.
I want you to just think of it, just imagine all of a sudden I'm a leasing consultant at this big company at this 500 unit apartment community.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, the property manager walks out and says, you know, let's say it's 4:45 and we stopped showing because it got dark now. And the property manager was in the back office and walked out there and said, "Where's Jim?" Oh, and then one of the other leasing agents, "Oh, he went on tour." It's after 4:45. What is he doing? And I came back, and she looked at me and said, imagine she looks at me and she goes, "What the heck are you doing? You know we don't show apartments after 4:45." If I looked at her and went, "Oh, come on, it was Grandma Ethel," right?
Mm-hmm.
They would snap my head off. All right, and that doesn't matter. So you're basically, what you're basically telling me is you're going to alter your business practice
Mm-hmm.
based on how somebody looks. Can someone say fair housing? Right. Okay.
And
Right.
just so people know,
Right.
explain fair housing for a second.
So, fair housing is basically making sure you're treating every prospect, every applicant, every resident exactly the same
And if
way.
you don't treat them the same.
Right. So, and if you don't treat them, you can be alleged that for discrimination purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you got to make sure your business practices, your rules and regulations, your leasing policies, your application process, your screening criteria, everything is set in stone and is going to be the same across the board, and you do not make exceptions, you do not bend for anything. Okay.
But then the after dark one. So explain, or actually go for it.
So after dark, so we do not show apartments after dark, but after dark is subjective. So one of the things is when I talk about stuff is that you need to make sure that you're going to set your policies objectively and measurably.
It's about setting the time.
Setting a time. So you say 4:45. That you can measure. Okay. Dark you can't measure. What's
Okay.
dark right now? Okay. So you don't know what that is. So you need to make sure you're setting it and saying we stop showing apartments at 4:45. Okay. That is something you can measure and you can be objectively look at. And then next week it's going to start getting dark a little bit earlier. So we're going to set that time to 4:25 now, and so on.
Okay.
Okay. So one of the big things when I teach, I said there are three primary things that are going to keep you out of the doghouse when it comes to landlord tenant law and fair housing law. Those three things are document, document, document everything. Okay. So that is the biggest key that one they stress big time where I come from, that side of the industry. That means, again, so you're going to document somewhere, you're going to write down and have a diary of this week we stopped showing at this time. Okay. Next week we stopped showing at that time, and keep documentation of that kind of stuff. Okay. So that's kind of a long drawn out way of explaining that. But
No, that makes sense, because I wasn't sure if with it being dark out, if there was a psychology component too or something.
well, it's a safety thing. Okay. It's a safety aspect. You're not showing apartments after dark for safety purposes. Okay. So, something, God forbid, happened to you. Obviously, nothing bad happens after dark. Nothing good happens after dark, right? So
This is every scary movie ever.
right, absolutely right. So you basically you set a policy that we don't show apartments at this time. If I'm not a big fan of landlords having basically just call and show apartments whenever. Have a set time that you do showings, because again, when it comes to fair housing law, a lot of times it's not necessarily what you're doing, but what does it look like you're doing. Okay. And when I try to explain to people, I tell landlords that you could do everything right, or you could have all good intentions to do what you're doing. But if it appears to someone that you're doing something for a nefarious reason, that's all it takes for them to make that fair housing complaint on you, right?
And then you've got a discrimination lawsuit on your
exactly.
hands.
Now you're calling that attorney, and you're having to pay a
Ready
lot
to
them,
spend a shit ton of money.
And then a lot of times they'll go talk to your current tenants. They'll talk to them, and then a lot of times they think that you did something wrong. So, there's this reputation issue you got to do. There's a lot of big headaches with this. It's just that. So when I explained that it's not the fact that you have to do something wrong. If it appears that you're doing something nefarious, that's all it takes for them to make that fair housing complaint on you. So. Where was I going with this? What was that? So you set policies and you don't deviate from them. But when we talk about the showing times, so if you have a particular showing time to say, I only show on Saturdays from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, you stick with that. You do not show at 4:05 or 4:10. Right? If Grandma Ethel says I can't get there till 4:10, right? That's it. Because now let's say you go, okay, I'll wait for you till 4:10. a week later, some hoodlum, comes by and calls you, and they clearly have an accent or something like that, or you can tell they're from some protected class, let's say, and they, when you want to be there, they can't make it till, because they work till 4 o'clock, and they can only get there at 5 after 4, and nope. I can only show till 4. I'm only going to show till 4. Now, you bent the rules for Grandma Ethel, but not them. All right. And what does that look like you did? Right.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if that you had a smoking hot date you had to attend at 4:10.
Right. And what and kind of to go along that line, what I always explain to them is, if you ever had some sort of pressing emergency, so if something happened where you have a showing times from noon to 4 on Saturdays, that's when you're gonna show that apartment. If ever something happens where, let's say, God forbid, you had to go take your son to the hospital or something, or you had an emergency, just again, what was it we just talked about before? Document. Make sure you document that down and put that in writing somewhere in your diary or some notebook somewhere, so that down the road, when someone says, well, he was going to show apartments from this time, but once he found out that I was, from this protected class, he wouldn't, because I wanted to be there at 3:30, and he normally would show till 4 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
Make sure you have some sort of documentation that I couldn't because I had an emergency, I had to go, whatever. Just keep track of that kind of stuff, because one of the other things is that they've got particular time frames that they can make fair housing complaints onto you, and federally it's 1 year, in our state it's a year, and in some states it could be up to 2 years. So someone could theoretically, in some states, a year and a half down the road from now, make that complaint against you, and hopefully you're going to have documentation in front of you showing that this is what happened that day. So I always teach, documentation is the key to keeping yourself out of the doghouse when it comes to this.
Yeah, but the other thing too is, separate from fair housing, you're also setting. I mean, I think if it's not done properly, because there's people that, I guess, let me say, I think you look at, it's about setting proper expectations too, because you get the person in, and something happens at 3 a.m. on Sunday morning, and you may be an hour away. You may have something going on. It may be Christmas, and the person's calling you about something. You want to do your best you can to help them out, but sometimes there's just certain times on, you're opening your presents with your kids on Christmas or something like that.
Sure, right.
And it's setting those unreasonable expectations, because I know that's one of the things that I had to learn when I was managing a few thousand clients a month, was because, certain people would set certain schedules or have certain ways of doing things. And if you didn't set it up properly, or you went out of the way and you didn't say that, and it's not about bragging, saying, you know what, I did this for you, I did that for you. It's like, no, if you set the proper expectation now, and you say, listen, I don't normally do this, isn't something that I'm not part of, in separate from the fair housing stuff. But if you say that this is not something I typically do, you preface all that and say, listen, I'm going to do XYZ. Then it goes over it. You're helping them out. It's an anomaly. It's not something that's saying, you know what, every single day we're going to have ice cream for breakfast. I'm going to bring it in. It's going to cater. It's going to be Blue Moon and Superman.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a lot of it's about setting the tone right away when they move in. So you got to make sure that they understand, who's boss and what your rules are. So you're going to sit them down, and we talk with them immediately when they sign their lease paperwork, and we go through line by line about the lease paperwork, and we explain to them what is considered a maintenance emergency and what not. So. Maintenance is on call for emergencies after office hours over here with us, but during office hours we will take and do normal day-to-day work orders with you.
Yeah, that's cool, because it's, like you said, if you didn't set those proper expectations, the person says, okay, an emergency. Well, I clogged the toilet. Then they're calling you. They're raising all holy hell fit and saying, you know what, I can't believe that this isn't done. That's not done. And it's like. If your toilet starts leaking and you have water on the floor, that's more of an emergency than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's it's setting the precedence right from the get-go and moving day. So you make sure that they understand what is considered an emergency and what's not.
So. And it's kind of hard, I guess. So you've been doing this long enough that you've seen a lot of people that haven't set the precedent since day one. From my experience, if you don't set it early off the bat, it'll result in many problems going on down the line.
Sure. Yeah.
So what's your take on that?
for as far as having. Well,
I mean, what
I
happens if you
haven't.
don't set it
Okay,
that
so I
first?
haven't had that experience because we don't,
Hmm.
we make sure we explain this to them right away. So they
Yeah.
so I mean I mean, sure, I'll have people where they'll call and they'll explain and they'll want them to come right away to go
Hmm.
fix their microwave or whatever, right? On a Saturday.
Hmm.
And when they come in on Monday morning and complain to the office that I called and my microwave wasn't working. Well, that's not an emergency, and
Hmm.
we do have to explain to them again. That's not an emergency. They're on call after hours or on weekends
Hmm.
for emergencies, and um, they I mean, they typically will understand after we explain it to them. But there's there's a difference between a major inconvenience
Hmm.
and an emergency, and 90% of what I would call and what we consider a major inconvenience might be something that they call an emergency, and it's not.
Hmm.
Yeah. So an emergency is fire, flood, water damage, you're locked out, no heat, no water.
Hmm.
Okay, your closet door falling off track is not an emergency.
Yeah.
Your that's not that's just a normal work order. Your microwave not working is a major inconvenience, but that's not an emergency.
You're not gonna die
Right, right. So there's life threatening stuff
unless you've
like
only
that.
got
Right.
pizza rolls in the
So
freezer.
water damage, water fire, um, health, anything health emergencies,
Hmm.
being locked out of your apartment, or anything with no heat, no water, no
Yeah.
hot water, those are emergencies.
No, that makes sense. So I guess jumping back, so you go from managing 470 some units. Where so what was the path after that?
So after that, I wanted to go. I mean, my whole aspiration was to go get bigger and better.
Hmm.
I wanted 700 units, then I wanted 900 units, then I wanted
Hmm.
1,000 units. I wanted to go I always wanted to go with the larger apartment communities, the even bigger ones. Um, and I went that direction for so many years. And after many years of being in that side of the business, I decided to kind of get away from the stress and the
Hmm.
rigmarole of that side of the industry and come over, leave the big cities and come over to a small rural town
Hmm.
and go work for a small private owner.
So how many did you manage at the biggest point?
So the largest place I worked at was 528 units.
Hmm.
I've worked at 489 units. At 475 units, 216 units. So all different sizes.
Hmm.
So they're all different animals, if you will.
So I guess when did you start to realize? Because I mean, the big thing, and one of the things we talked about even before the cameras are rolling, there's so much that can be taken from the larger industry. Not even from the larger industry. You got places that are 500, and you got places that are only 200 units.
Sure.
When did you start to see that there were some parallels or things that you're like, you know what, this needs to be adopted there, or this needs to get brought over?
Well, here's the thing. So one of the things about that side of the
Hmm.
industry, okay, as opposed to, okay, we talked about the Toyotas and the Chrysler side of the business versus the Bob's Auto Sales things.
Hmm.
When you go to the Bob's Auto Sales side of things, you'll when it comes to that industry, you go to Bob and he will do things completely different than Joe does at Joe's Auto
Hmm.
Sales. Okay, and then they'll do things completely different than how Chris does things at Chris's Auto Sales, right?
Hmm.
That's not necessarily really how things are over on that side of the business. Right? In other words, when I would work at one company, okay,
Hmm.
and it was a big national organization. Let's say we'll just keep with the automobile thing. When I would work at the Toyota
Hmm.
dealership, and we would have employees that would come work with us. They would start to come. We would hire a gal that she'd come work with us, and she comes from years of working at Honda, let's say.
Hmm.
Okay, we didn't have to train her on any of this stuff.
Hmm.
She already knew these things. Okay, so the stuff that I train on is not something that where it's like, well, we did it like this over at Toyota and Chrysler and Ford. We
Hmm.
didn't do it this way at Honda and Subaru and Saturn, but I just like the way that we did this over at Toyota, Chrysler, and Ford. That's not what this is.
Hmm.
The stuff that I teach on is things that you go to any one of these places, they all pretty much adopt these business practices and operate under these pretenses. Okay, so
Hmm.
so you take anything that I teach on, you're going to go to any one of these big companies and walk into that leasing office, talk to that leasing agent, and they've already been trained on this stuff.
Yeah, but the thing is, so you got Bob and Joe's.
Right. On
The,
that side of the business, yes.
yeah, but the thing that gets me is a lot of them will say that you can't adopt these practices because I'm not big enough to have a maintenance guy. I'm not big enough. So
Okay,
when did
well,
you start to
okay.
see that? And like,
Well, it's not about being big enough to have a maintenance guy or
hmm
anything like that. It's some of these business practices that we do. So there's things that we teach our leasing agents to say certain things or
hmm
don't say it a particular way. Okay, the mindset of thinking, well, but okay, that's true over there, but I own Bob's Auto Sales, so that kind of stuff doesn't apply to me. Is I think is where you're getting at, this mindset that it doesn't apply to me because I own Bob's Auto Sales, and that's not necessarily the case. So I'll give you
hmm
an example. So one of the things that we teach is when it comes to fair housing law,
hmm
okay, is that you don't have to, as we mentioned a minute ago, you don't have to do anything wrong
hmm
for someone to make that fair housing complaint on you.
yeah,
The only thing that really needs to happen is they need to think that you did something wrong. Okay.
hmm
So when we would train leasing agents, okay, we would we would do a lot of role playing, or
hmm
we'd have them watch a VHS videotape, and then we'd either stop the role play for a second, or we'd hit the pause button on the VHS tape, right? And we'd say, okay, group, okay, this is a bunch of brand new leasing agents that are just starting working in the industry. And we'd say to them, okay, now look, the leasing consultant didn't do anything wrong, right? However, forget about what you just saw happen. What does it look like happened? Right?
hmm
And if it looks like something nefarious went on, that's all it takes for them to make that fair housing complaint if they think they did something wrong, right? So now that said, so I go through the scenario of okay, it's 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday morning, and your phone rings. And it's this woman on the other end of the line, and she says, yes, I'm calling about your two-bedroom apartment that you have
hmm
available. And you say, yeah, it's a beautiful two-bedroom apartment. It's overlooking the mountains. It has a beautiful, washer and dryer in the unit. It comes with an attached garage.
yeah,
Great, this sounds really good. I'm going to go run some errands, and I'm going to go take a look at it in a little bit. Yeah, okay.
hmm
Then you hang up the phone, and then you go back to blowing your leaves and picking up trash and stuff and everything.
hmm
But a few minutes later, about 10 minutes later, this car drives by, and this guy rolls his window down and says, hey, I see your for rent sign out there. Let's gonna see if you have a two-bedroom. Yeah, I do. Can I go take a look at it? You go show them the apartment. This looks really great. I just got out of a job interview, and I just got offered this job there. I'm moving to the area, and I got my job offer letter right here. I'd like to take this. I want to fill out an application.
hmm
He fills out the application. He's got his job offer letter right in front of you, right?
yeah,
Okay, so you got all that income verification right there. You go run his background check. Comes back. This guy's clean as a whistle. Everything looks good,
hmm
right? Okay. So now you got this. He passes the whole smell test, right?
yeah,
Everything comes back clean. All right. Got the apartment rented, right?
hmm
Okay. Shake hands with this guy. I'll see you on moving day. Welcome home. I can't wait to have you here, right?
yeah,
Finally, you got that puppy off your back. Okay. You don't have to worry about that anymore. He goes, takes off. You go back to blowing your leaves and cleaning your gutters and this and that. About another 5 minutes go by, and this car pulls up next to you. This woman rolls her window down and says, hey, are you the guy I talked to you about that apartment a minute ago? And you tell her,
it just got rented.
oh, I see. Okay. So a minute ago you had this apartment available, but now that I'm here and you see that I'm Hispanic and I got two kids in the back seat, you suddenly don't have it available anymore? Right? Forget about what happened. What does it look like just happened? Right?
Isn't that
Okay.
just a bunch? What's
Well,
crazy though is
okay, but so
yeah,
so now this woman now decides, okay, well that's BS. I'm going to go make a fair housing complaint on this guy, right? Because I
hmm
think he just told me it's not available because he just saw who I am right now, right?
hmm
Okay, and now you got to go hire that attorney, and that HUD agent's now going to investigate you and all this stuff. It's going to cost you time and money and reputation, all this stuff. Now, let's
yeah,
go over to my side of things, the Toyota side of the industry,
hmm
right? That same exact carbon copy situation goes on, right?
hmm
That HUD agent comes and knocks on our door and says, hey, explain yourself. What do you think we'd do?
pull up the documentation.
We'd whisk that HUD agent away in a matter of 30 seconds. This will all be over with. Because we have what's called, okay, so let's go back to the very beginning now.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to come over into my world, go to the Toyota side of things. We're going to leave that Bob's Auto Sales world.
hmm
We're going to come over to that Toyota. That phone rings now. Julia is a leasing consultant at a 400-unit apartment community.
hmm
Julia is going to answer the phone. Julia has what's called a phone traffic log. And she's going to document down the date and the time that phone call came in.
Okay.
Her name, when she's looking to move, how many occupants, any animals, all this stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that guy comes in. We're going to sit him down at the table and we're going to fill out a guest card. And we're going to document down the date and the time that he came in. His name, when he's
Mm-hmm.
looking to move, how many occupants, any animals, what apartments we showed him, and so on and so forth. Now, this is part of the where the legal side of this kind of comes into play, all right? Is that they have up to 1 year to make a fair housing complaint on you federally, okay? And in our state where we're in, they also have a year. So it's 1 year they have to make a fair
Mm-hmm.
housing complaint on you. In some states, when I used to work in states outside of where we are, it was up to 2 years. In some of our sister properties that we had in other states, it was 2 years in some of those states. So you always got to know what your jurisdiction
Mm-hmm.
at time. Now, why I'm telling you is, so we have that guest card and those phone traffic logs, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now, fast forward to December. It's now the end of the year. We're going to gather up all our guest cards. We're going to gather up all our phone traffic logs. We're going to put them in a box label, 2022 guest cards and phone traffic logs,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to hang on to these for a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a business practice that every single one of those guys do from one end of the country to the next. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
There's no law that says you have to do this, right? But you
Yeah.
can see this is something that you should do, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff I go over. Now, I kind of went off onto a tangent here,
Mm-hmm.
but because we started on a point that I was trying to make on this, how we got into this. But
Yeah, but think about it though. The fact that people really feel that way nowadays,
oh, sure,
isn't it just crazy?
It's not even nowadays. I mean, to give you understanding, I came into the business back in 1996.
Yeah.
Okay, and they've been doing this since before the dawn of time. You know, this is something they were doing many years ago. So to give you an understanding how important they think this is over on the
Mm-hmm.
side of the industry where I come from, you know, there's a lot of firsts. You remember,
Mm-hmm.
you remember your first date you went on. You remember that first car you bought. You remember
Oh, yeah.
you remember your first job you ever had. There's a lot of first things you remember,
course,
right? There's a lot
yeah.
of firsts that you remember, right? There's a lot of things they taught me on that side of the business that I learned over there. That guest card phone traffic log thing, that's the first thing they showed me. That's the first thing to give you an understanding how important they think that is. They showed me that before they showed me where to hang up my coat.
Wow.
Okay, that's how vital and important they think that is. Now, my message to them, to these Bob's Auto Sales guys and the little landlords out there, is if there's a business practice that those guys, the big massive companies, the Toyotas and the Chryslers of our industry, think are so stinking important that they make sure they teach this to you right away, why the hell are these guys not learning this stuff? All right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's scary. There shouldn't be such a disconnect between how they teach their associates the stuff that they learn over there and the stuff that never gets to them, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what my business, my landlord training stuff tries to kind of bridge that gap a little bit and bring that small landlord all that training and all that goodness that we give our leasing agents over at that side of the industry.
And it's crazy though, because I think that's super cool that you do that. And it's what's astonishing is like we were talking about before we got rolling. It's cool there's guys like you out there that are actually teaching people the next step, because otherwise you get out in the real world and you have all these people, real estate especially, with it being a hot button topic, that everyone's like, oh, it's get rich quick, I'm gonna make so much money, it's gonna be a massive empire. It's like, okay, you see a lot of these guys get into it, they buy their first property and they're like, okay, I'm a landlord, I'm a real estate investor now. Okay, and you have all these guys telling them, go do this, go do this, go do this. They go back to these guys, they're like, okay, I just did it. I just signed on the dotted line. I just bought my first property. And then they look at it, they go back to the same guy that said, hey, you got to do this, and say, how do I do this? And they're like, well, you just got to do it. It's like, it's not what I asked.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that's cool with you, because you took this during COVID and you actually put it into a class and said, you know what? There's a lot of people that need to know this stuff, because one of the things is you got to see how the Bob's Auto and a lot of those guys operated to say, you know what? A lot of the stuff you guys need to graft from Toyota. You need to graft from Toyota, Honda, all these larger real estate conglomerates or management practices, and start doing it with your business. It's going to make it much easier, and it's not a fly-by-night operation at that point.
Right. And it will completely revolutionize your landlording business. Right? And once it becomes easier for you to do, and it takes a lot of that stress, a lot of these things take a lot of that stress out of there, you'll be able to grow and get bigger units
Hmm.
and purchase more units. But so there, like I said, I kind of take the football from there and help them from when they've now bought the property. They've talked to
Hmm.
that investor guy and then taught them all that stuff about investing and what to invest in and how to invest. But now you bought that property. Now,
Hmm.
okay, now you got to operate it.
Yep.
Now, so there's all that kind of stuff that I go from there with them.
So I guess one question I have for you, because I work primarily on the marketing end of things, and I see so many people doing different ways of this. How do you get the places filled? What do you think is the best marketing tool?
Okay, well, so when it comes to marketing, so again, so every property is gonna. So one thing you
Hmm.
do not want to do when it comes to that kind of stuff is have a cookie cutter idea when it comes to marketing, because
Hmm.
every single property is gonna. If when I would oversee numerous, if I was going to oversee numerous properties, numerous managers at
Hmm.
numerous properties, one of the things I don't want to see is you better not have. Let's say they all are the same size apartment
Hmm.
communities. So therefore, and they're financially they're all on the same level. So they're all going to have the same dollar amount for budget. So every property is going to have a $10,000 a month marketing budget. Okay,
Yeah.
you better not be spending the same money on for that $10,000. You better not be spending it the same way from this property or your other there, because every property is going to be a little bit different. So I'll give you an example. So where the property where one of the properties where if you're in a property where you're kind of off the beaten path a little bit, it
Hmm.
takes you a little bit to kind of get there, and you're kind of off the beaten path. You really shouldn't be putting a lot of energy into like banners and flags and
Hmm.
flowers and all that. Yeah, that's good to do for your current residents. It makes it look nice and everything like that. But you're going to put a lot of energy into your print advertising, right?
Hmm.
That same level of property, but now you're on a busy highway. You have
Hmm.
an apartment building on a busy highway. You better be taking a lot of your marketing dollars and not putting it into that print ad, but you better. I want to see a lot of flowers and flags and
Hmm.
banners and drive by, because you're gonna
Signage.
signage, because
Hmm.
a lot of your your tours and your eyeballs looking at this are going to come from that drive-by traffic, right?
Hmm.
And one of the things, it depends on how big of a highway or how big of a drive-by traffic you're at.
Hmm.
So if you're in a very extremely busy highway, these people are going by here at the same time every day and all day long, every day, all year long, right?
Hmm.
After a while, your eyeballs get so used to seeing the same thing. You start stop noticing the colors over there on that side of the
Hmm.
road when you've been going by here every
Oh,
day
of
for the last
course.
5 years, right?
Hmm.
So one of the things that you need to be doing is putting more money into changing up your advertise your not your advertise your curb appeal. Okay,
Hmm.
so I give an example of my apartment community I managed in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
That was right off of a very busy highway, and it being off this on this very extremely busy highway, we put a lot of our marketing dollars into flags, and we put these big tall flags up in the front, and we had like 8 or 10 flags that were spread out about 20 feet apart and
Hmm.
all along the frontage of the property, and it was because the same people drive by there to go
Hmm.
to work every single day on that highway, on that busy highway. We would change the flag colors up every month. So every first of the month, it was the job of the grounds guy to go out there and take those flagpoles down and put new flags up. We had new colorful flags,
Hmm.
and we'd have a different set of colors for every month. So like March, we'd put green and white, and April we'd have like a purple and pink,
Hmm.
for that for springtime, and we'd have different colors for every month. And then and every first of the month we'd go out there and change the colors so that your eyes now go, oh, what's going on over there?
That's smart.
So you, because otherwise you start driving by that same sign every day
Hmm.
and you completely forget it's there.
Yeah.
Right. And that one day when we want you to remember, hey, we're here, is going to be that time when you're now looking for an apartment, right?
Hmm.
And you've been driving by, but you completely forget because you totally stop seeing that sign now, right? So you want to change that stuff up every once in a while, depending on how busy of a highway or how busy of a street you're on.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes it might be every season. Maybe if it's every
Yeah.
3 months, or maybe it's every month you change it up.
But that's smart because a lot of people look at it, they're like, okay, I've got the signs out there, it's not working. I've got the ads going. And I think you make a great point because I see that with a lot of businesses. That one of the biggest problems is even when you start to get into and I got to critique the larger businesses because I look at a lot of their marketing avenues, it starts to get lost. And if you don't have somebody on the ground that's actually keeping an eye on things and managing those, like, I mean, just if the guy said, you know what, we're putting the flags out, and you're like, okay, our marketing budget, we've got it in the flags, and we're doing this and we're doing that, and you were to misspend that, and
Right.
if somebody's not keeping an eye on it, all that 10,000, you're only really
Right.
utilizing $3,000 of
Right.
it.
And so this is kind of this, which is part of the. So one of my classes is just called Mastering the Art of Apartment Marketing and Leasing, and we talk about stuff like that. And one of the things we talk about is on that phone traffic log that I talk about in my other class, which is the fundamentals of fair housing class. That's when I talk about the guest cards and the phone traffic logs part. But now one of the things on that phone traffic or on that guest card, when you're talking to people, one of those questions is not just how many occupants will it be, or are you looking for a 1 or 2 bedroom? You should be asking them, how did you hear about us? Okay. And have some sort of a tickler. And now my phone traffic log that I have in my class, it actually has a tickler, if you will, a little, and it's an Excel worksheet that you can go into, and it comes with my class, and you can alter it to put all the different marketing sources up there. So if you have the apartment magazine and the newspaper ad or drive by or one of my residents referred you or whatever,
Yeah.
you have all these different things. And then every time you're on the phone with them or you're on tour with them, you should be having that, mark off, how they heard about you. And then every month or every quarter or whatever, you should be reevaluating your marketing and seeing where your marketing dollars are going to. Again, there goes that kind of another business practice that I told you that if I didn't do that where I come from, if any of my companies ever looked up and said, okay, well, we're spending $3,000 a month on advertising and marketing. Do you even know if our Craigslist ad is working? And I looked at my supervisor and said, I don't know. They've smacked me upside the head, right? Now, how many of these small mom and pop landlords out there, if I looked at you and said, well, you put an ad in that newspaper every week for your how many of these people that are calling you saw you from that newspaper ad? If you're looking at me going, well, I don't know, you're worried about spending money on my classes, and you don't even know whether you're spending money properly on your advertising.
That's one of the biggest things that blows my mind, because I see so many. There's all these examples out there of people that spend the money and they don't get a damn thing out of it.
Yeah.
And it just kills me, because I look at it, and I even see all these businesses right now that are going to different people and that are taking this advice, or like, oh, we're getting this and we're getting that. And I look at it, and it's just, you can tell it's not getting results. Because one of the things with the flags that you're talking about that's different from a brochure, even with the brochure, who the hell reads those? I mean, think about it. Who flips open a brochure? If it's not two-sided with big words on it, we're both not going to read them. But the thing is with the flags, when those colors change, that's a topic of conversation driving past. Oh, they changed the colors of the flags. And at a certain point, it's like, oh, so-and-so apartments changed the colors of the flags. And one day you're going to be driving past there. You just got evicted. Your lease is up. The rent's gone crazy. Who knows what the situation is? Something's going to tick inside their brain. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize too, is sometimes it's not just a ploy of 1 month, because somebody may move out. At what point do you stop marketing is my question for you.
Well, that's one of the things we teach our leasing agents is they would say is when does the lease renewal process start? So some people will, they start sending out lease renewal notices 90 days out before their lease expires. Some people start sending them 60 days out, and you're trying to woo and wow them and say, hey, renew your lease, and we'll do this for you. And so when does the lease renewal process start? When should the lease renewal process start? The day they move in. The day they move in, they become a current resident here. You should be convincing them from that day on to renew their lease. So their lease renewal. So stop thinking in the mindset of we're going to work on renewing their lease 90 days before their lease comes to expire. I want you to work on retaining them as a resident the day they move in. Okay, so if it's changing that mindset of the lease renewal process starts 90 days ahead of time, or 60 days, or 120 days ahead of time. It starts once they move in.
Yeah. And I think that's smart, because one of the things I was actually just talking with one of my clients about this. That's one of the biggest things, is if you don't prep the people for something ahead of time and say, okay, this is coming, let's get ready. Or not even just saying, okay, this is going to happen in a year, but just getting the person thinking about it. Once you get to the 90 days is crunch time. 30 days it's here. And you did a cool thing that I thought was ingenious. And that's what you guys do to the people that stick around.
Oh, the lease renewal incentive program. Okay,
Yes.
yeah. So
This
that,
is absolutely
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
If people don't listen to anything else but this,
So this is and that's a program that I brought here. And again, I won't take credit for it. It was something I heard from a seminar many years ago, and I thought
mm-hmm,
that was genius. And I came here, and it's worked like it's been a hit for everybody. And so, like a lot of apartment communities and a lot of management companies, what they were doing is they would say, renew your lease and we'll give you $100 off your off May's rent or whatever,
mm-hmm,
right? Yeah. Or we'll give you half off May's rent if you renew your lease.
yeah,
And so what we do is, instead of that, I got rid of all the promotions and all the specials the minute I came here, and we stopped offering any promotions and specials. And what we do is we have what's called a lease renewal incentive program,
mm-hmm,
and it's renew your lease, and then on the lease renewal letter there's a menu of options that you get to pick from, and there's 15, 16 different things that you can pick from. And every year you get to pick one thing to update your apartment in. So if it's, let's say you got the wooden board shelving and pole in your closets, we'll take that out and put the California closets, the white wire shelving in there.
mm-hmm,
Or if you've got that old rickety kitchen sink, in there with the pull-out sprayer, we'll take that out and we'll put a new, updated kitchen faucet with a pull-out sprayer in there, and maybe more of a modern
mm-hmm,
kitchen faucet in there. Things of that like that. We'll install a garbage disposal for you.
mm-hmm,
Right? These are things that are going to update the apartment and add value to the building, for that matter.
mm-hmm,
And then it helps them renew next year as well. It's kind of that gift that keeps on
mm-hmm.
giving, because next year their lease comes to expire and they're thinking, oh boy, my rent went up again. I'm going to go take a look around and see what's out there. But now they go look around at the place across the street, and it's got that wooden board shelving in the pole, and
No California
they've been
closet.
so used to that California
Mm-hmm.
closets for the last 12 months, right? They've been spoiled with that now, right? So it's that gift that
Mm-hmm.
keeps on giving, if you will. Not only that, but then if God forbid, let's say they don't renew, let's say they get
Mm-hmm.
transferred out of the state and they can't renew, it's something that's going to help you rent the apartment to that next person when you show up
Yeah.
there. So it's not it is a true investment, and it's not something where
Mm-hmm.
you gave them $200 off May's rent because they renewed their lease, and they took that $200 and went and bought brand new shoes. Well,
Exactly.
that brand new set of shoes is not going to help them renew their lease next year.
Yeah, but at the other thing, I mean, from a business perspective, you're throwing away money.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Right,
you're throwing away $400. Let's say the rent's $800, and you're like, we'll give you half off your first month's rent
Yeah.
for renewing. $400 you're leaving off the table. Instead, what's the cost to convert a closet? What's the cost to
Right.
change out the faucet? What's the cost to do all these different things? And you get to pass that on, like you said, to the next tenant or to the next resident that lives there.
Yeah. 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 So it's a win-win situation for everybody, and I implemented that the day I came here, and it has been an absolute hit, and everybody loves it. And
So why don't you think it's being implemented more?
I, I I think that some are just kind of stuck in that way of doing things. And I shouldn't say it, because I've been out of that side of the industry for many years, so I really
Mm-hmm.
don't know whether some of them are maybe not doing that these days. Maybe they are,
Yeah.
but there there was a lot of reluctancy at some of my companies to do
Mm-hmm.
that before. They just were like, oh, it's just easier. Let's just give them half off July's rent if they
Mm-hmm.
renew. And that's just the easy elementary way to do things, and it's not going to help you down the road. They're not going to remember you for that a year from now when their lease comes to expire. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
remember that garbage disposal that you put in,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's really a no brainer, and
And it's a constant reminder.
absolutely
I mean, $400. When's the last time you blew $400 on something that you didn't need to?
yeah, and exactly, and then and next year when their lease comes up to expire, they're not going to think of whatever they bought for
Yep.
that $400. That's not going to help them
Mm-hmm.
renew their lease next year. So it's not really doing anybody any good, you know.
Exactly.
Um, so then one of the incentives that we offer, one of them they can pick from, is to do what's called an accent wall. So they get to pick whatever wall they want.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a swatch of a bunch of colors from the paint company. It's a bazillion different colors, and they can pick it. So they pick that color and they tell us which wall, and we will paint that wall that accent color. So it might be like a purple or a blue or whatever they want it painted. And then now when they move out, we will keep that wall the way it is for when we go do the make ready. We're going to go and get the apartment ready and get the painting and cleaning it and get it maintenance ready for the next resident to move in.
Yeah.
But we will keep that accent wall like that. And then as I show it, it gives me an opportunity to now talk to people about our lease renewal program because
Hmm.
it kind of gives me that to break the ice on that.
Hmm.
And I tell them about that this person at one time picked this blue wall here to paint it like this.
Hmm.
So if you want us to keep it like this, let me know. And if you rent this apartment, and you want me to keep it like this, we'll keep it. If not, we'll put it back to white. But then what it does is not only breaks the ice and gives me that opportunity to explain that to them,
Hmm.
but it also puts in their head of obviously someone did renew here at one time,
Hmm.
right? So it helps sales wise for selling wise that way too.
And I one thing I wanted to talk about too was before we hopped on camera, we talked about the subtleties and how sometimes those make all the difference with just different ways that you phrase things. And I related it to one of the things is a lot of people when I do video shoots, I've worked with politicians, business owners of all ages, of all different industries. And one of the big things is we go in there and it's like, okay, you got to say this. And they're like, well, I don't know how to say it like that. It's like, no, we gotta,
Yeah.
and it's the tone, it's the inflection, it's the, we're gonna say hey instead of hi,
Right.
and it's all the different little things because they can have such an impact on the demeanor and how it's perceived.
Right.
And that's one thing
in
we,
your example,
yeah,
you're talking about more of kind of the overall feeling that you're going to get from that, right?
hmm
When I talk about that on our side of the industry, it's more of what you could be insinuating, and what
hmm
we that as we talked about a little bit earlier,
hmm
is it's not really what you're doing; it's what does it look like you're
hmm
doing, you know? So I always tell when I teach landlords, and we teach leasing agents, is I know what you meant.
hmm
That person that's on showing with you, they know damn well what you meant when you said that.
yeah,
That HUD agent that's shopping you right now, they know damn well what you meant when you said that. All right. But that's
yeah,
not what they're here for. That HUD agent is here to play gotcha with you. And you say that they gotcha. So
hmm
what do I mean by that? So one of the things that we talk about is I have a little section in one of my class in my teachings is what called say this, not that.
hmm
Okay. And we go through all these things that are like, don't say this. I want you to say that. So for example, we talk about um, driver's license. You
hmm
know, make sure you provide a copy of your driver's license. You do not want them to provide a copy of their driver's license. Now, so yeah, again, it's what does it look like you're doing? Not okay. So what that HUD agent who's out, I always when I try to kind of teach this, I always give them the question of what is the purpose of the HUD agent? Why does the HUD agent wake up every morning? What is their purpose in life? I mean, we all of us have a purpose in life, right? We all
hmm
put on this earth for some reason. What is that HUD agent here for? And they are here to play gotcha with you and I. All right. They're
okay,
here. That's their whole purpose in life is to play gotcha. Hey, you say something, I heard you. They got you
hmm
now. All right. So I try to teach them, don't give them more ammunition than what they already have. Okay.
hmm
So for example, we require you to have a driver's license. No, you don't. Okay, that's not you want. So what that HUD agent just now what you and I just heard them say is okay. I got to show them my ID and make sure they want to know I am who I say I am. Right?
yeah,
Okay, that HUD agent basically just heard you say okay, really? So in order for me to live here, I have to prove to you that I'm a capable, able-bodied individual who can drive a car. So what if I'm a paraplegic?
wow,
What if because I don't if I'm a paraplegic, I don't have a driver's license, do I? But you just told me you require me to have a driver's license. That's not what you meant to say. What you want, and now at the same time, you don't want me coming in with my Planet Fitness ID either,
yeah,
because that could be altered by my buddy who works in the ID making department at Planet Fitness, right?
yeah.
So you want to make sure that they're going to provide you with a U.S. government issued photo ID, not a driver's license. Okay.
Is this? I guess. Let me ask: is this a? Have you seen more of an uptick in this, or has this always
No, this
been?
has just been. What you got to do is you got to understand that a lot of times with them they see a lot of times it's a cat and mouse game a lot of times with them.
Hmm.
HUD sees landlords as we're the big bad guys, we're the big bad wolf,
Hmm.
and their purpose in life is to try to play gotcha with us, right, and
Hmm.
to try to prove that we're doing something that we're really not. And
Yeah.
and so when they hear you say something a certain way, they, there's that, and especially it's gotten worse in today's society.
Hmm.
Kind of go on your point, where there's that professional victim mentality of,
Hmm.
what do you mean by that, right? What are you trying to say by that, right? And I that's not what I meant.
Hmm.
I don't mean you have to be a able, capable-bodied individual who can drive a car, right?
Hmm.
You need to give me a U.S. government issued photo ID.
Hmm.
Right. Okay. So you'd also, also as I've talked about with your mom, I clarified with her that you don't want to just say a government issued photo ID, right?
Hmm.
Because someone comes in with their Venezuelan driver's license, that's a government issued photo ID, right?
And then you could be discriminating against
Well,
them.
but here's the thing. So as she pointed out rightly, is that a is that a uh, immigration status is not a
Hmm.
protected class, right? So
Hmm.
you can make sure that they are a U.S. citizen, right? Okay.
Okay.
So basically saying to them, it needs to be a U.S. government issued photo ID. Because if you just say, well, I need it to be a government issued photo ID, and let's say that says that in your criteria, and they come in with their Venezuelan driver's license, right? You don't want to all of a sudden like change your criteria right there on the spot and say, oh, no, now I need it now to be a U.S. government issued, because now it looks like you're altering your criteria based on who's sitting in front of you right now, right? So you want to make sure that you say that ahead of time and you specify that you need to provide a U.S. government issued photo ID, not a driver's license, not a photo ID, not a government issued photo, but a U.S. government issued photo ID. Okay.
Isn't what I just I can't believe that. I mean, I get what you're saying, but it's like the fact that there's a cat and mouse game going on with HUD, and then you also got to deal with
The fact
different.
that there are people out there who play professional victims,
Hmm.
and they want the story to be true that you and I are these big bad wolves
Yeah.
who don't like them, and they will try to find any little thing. So I always try to teach them how to make sure you're saying it the right
Hmm.
way. Say exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
You meant to say. So here's another example. All right. So and I found this when I came to work, when I came to this property. This was in the laundry room. There's a
Hmm.
sign in the laundry room that says, it says, please, um, do not overload the washers. Please, remove your clothes out of the washing machine promptly. Um, do not, do not, use too much soap or whatever. There's all these little
Yeah.
rules. And then it said, children are not allowed to play in the laundry room. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you're thinking, okay, well,
Seems legit. That
seems
seems okay.
okay. And what that HUD agent looks at that and goes, so what are you trying to say? Is it okay if an adult plays in the laundry room? Look, you don't want me riding my
Yeah.
bicycle up and down the stairways, up and down the stairs either, right? Make sure your rules and regulations stated as such. So I don't want to see things in your rules that says children can't do this and children can't do that and children,
Hmm.
right? If you ever want to know, does this sound right and should I be doing this? Always just so. Well, one of the things I explained to them is that there are those all the protected classes, right? There's the
Hmm.
seven federally protected classes. Okay,
Okay.
there is not one protected class that gets any more special treatment than any other protected class, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so if you can't do this with this group, you also can't do it with that group. So
Yeah.
if you ever think to yourself, okay, does that sound right? Is that okay for me to say that? All right, take the word children out of there and replace it with the word Asians.
Hmm.
So I have a sign in my laundry room that says Asians are not allowed to play in the laundry room, right? Okay.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be saying something like that, right? The
Exactly.
same goes true with the children thing. So make sure you're not doing stuff like that. Okay.
Hmm.
So I go back and look at your rules and regulations and make sure you're not saying things like children can't be doing this and
Hmm.
children can't be doing that. It's nobody can be doing this.
Yeah.
You don't want me riding my bicycle up and down the stairs either, right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Of course.
Right. So make sure your rules and regulations are saying nobody can play in the laundry room.
Hmm.
Nobody can be doing this, right? Not just children can't do this.
So, I mean, since you've got over 30 years of experience, and you've definitely seen people mess up and make mistakes in this. What is there a situation that comes to mind that you saw the dark side of this happen, where somebody ended up getting a bad interaction with HUD or something like that?
Well, I mean, I see them say things a lot of times. We've always just been, the side of the industry where I come in from, and,
Hmm.
and the interactions I've come from. Uh, those things don't happen because we don't, because that side of the industry we don't talk like that. We don't do
Hmm.
those types of things. So, and it's not where, like I said, this is not really a legal thing where there's
Hmm.
no law that says you can't do this. They just tell you it's best that you don't do that. We suggest you don't do these things, right? This
Yeah.
is not. It's not you know so it's better to just kind of not put yourself out there,
Hmm.
if you will.
But have you had any students or anything that have just? Because I mean, like you said, a lot of your places, like before you even take your coat off, they've got it hammered in on you. They've got
Right,
it
right.
drilled in where it's like, this is what you need to do.
Hmm.
Okay, now we can go grab lunch or even eat
Yes, yeah,
breakfast or
yeah.
get out of bed. So, like, throughout your time though, have you seen any situations or heard about anything with your students or anything where you're like, oh my gosh?
No, not from where. I
Okay.
mean, what I've seen is I mean, not where they've gotten in trouble for it, but
Hmm.
I've seen things where I can see potentially stuff going down the line.
Okay.
I've seen on their websites where they'll say things like
Hmm.
that, and I think, my God, if I ever said that over there, they'd beat me to death. You know, so that so it's there's just things
Yeah.
that all I do is I see the stuff that they're saying and doing, and I
Hmm.
think, my God, if I ever said that over a Toyota or a Chrysler, they would smack me upside the head.
Yeah.
That would never fly over there. But yet they do that I see this all the time over
Hmm.
on the small landlord side of things.
That's crazy. And I get why you have to do it. I still just I have a hard time fathoming. And like I get that you have to do it, but I just the victim mentality
Yeah.
with some people because it's I haven't really met that many people. I've
Mhm.
met a lot of landlords.
Yeah.
I've I've had good landlords. I've had bad landlords.
Mhm.
I haven't seen anybody that was absolutely maliciously out to get me. Even if that place I was
Yeah.
telling you about was
Yeah.
poorly managed,
Mhm.
it still wasn't like they were saying, you know what, we
Well,
don't
and
like you because of X, Y,
and the
Z.
actual customer itself might not be, but what they
Yeah.
do is once they'll make that complaint to HUD, HUD will then send shoppers to come out. And they'll act like they're
Mm,
looking at apartments. And if they hear you say something that maybe kind of triggers them to say something, that they that that could
mhm.
lead to further things. So
That's a
so
good
so
point.
I don't know how your audience, how much they know about you and your family, and if you want to get into who your mom is and stuff. And
Sure.
okay, so just as a caveat, your mother is a landlord tenant law attorney.
Hmm.
Okay, one of the things that she teaches is very similar to what I do is I teach them is
Hmm.
and she touches on this too in her seminars, that when you're going to validate some, just to kind of go on by, it's how you
Hmm.
say things and what you're saying, is when you're going to validate that they make enough money to qualify to live at your property, you're going to do a
Elise?
no, you're gonna. So I'm gonna make sure you make enough money to live here. So I'm gonna
Oh, of
do.
course.
So I'm gonna do a what
Credit
verification?
check?
No, that makes sure you pay your bills on time. How am I gonna make sure that you're gonna make enough money to live here?
Make sure you got a job.
Okay,
I guess
okay.
I'm
You're
off
getting
base.
it. Kind of, yes. Okay, that kind of what you said right there. Yes. So you say make sure your job. So they say, you'll see here landlords say, we're gonna do an employment verification.
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
All right. No, you are not going to do, and this, and your mother touches on this in her seminars as well too. So is you're not going to do an employment verification. You're going to do an income verification.
Hmm.
So remember we just talked about before with what are you trying to say?
Hmm.
That an adult can't play in the laundry room or whatever. So that HUD agent hears you and says, "What are you trying to say?" So I have to be a capable, able-bodied individual who can get up and go to work every day. So I have to have a
Oh.
job in order to live here? No, you need to make sure that they make enough income to meet your screening criteria.
Hmm.
Okay. Not that you're not going to do an employment
Yeah.
verification. You're going to do an income verification. Right.
Hmm.
So again, so it's say this, not that.
Yeah, but
Okay. That's part of that,
yeah.
that too.
Yeah, but the crazy thing though is you mentioned the fact that a lot of these different government entities will go undercover, lack of a better
Mhm.
term, incognito,
Yeah.
and they'll go just say, "Hey, I want to check out this apartment." Okay, yeah, stop on in. We'd love to have you.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many stories I've heard outside of my family, even where these people have just. It's like, okay, it just felt weird. The person was a little weird. I didn't understand it, and it somehow or another they find out or they just suspect or something happens, well, they start getting asked all these pinpointed questions.
Mhm.
And I remember I've shown a couple apartments where I had it one time where I was showing the apartment. I go in there, it's like, okay, my my dad called and he's like, hey, he's like, I'm out of town. He's like, I know you're in town. He's like, do you mind showing the apartment? I'm like, yeah, I don't care.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I go in there and I'm like, okay, yeah, oh yeah, this is the bathroom. Take a look. Here's the living room. You got a kitchen here. It's got this. And some of the questions and some of the situations that you're in where it's like, this person asked me this. It's a
Sure.
very weird way of
Yeah.
phrasing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, no,
And there's that time when you're kind of your spidey sense goes up and goes, okay, what's going on here? What? And then,
yeah.
I don't like to talk like this, but use that. Here's another analogy.
Mhm.
A lot because I don't like to analogize this as criminals or something like
Yeah.
that. Bad people. But if you're a really astute drug dealer,
Hmm.
right? And you've been doing this a long time. How many times do you watch like Cops, or you watch like this
Yeah,
guy's
of
like,
course.
and you see that undercover cop, and how many of those guys are going, no, I know you're a cop, right?
Yep.
It's like, how do you know? Yeah, because he's been doing this so long, right? That's kind of like, you get that sense
Of
sometimes like this,
course.
and so it's that same kind of sense that
Hmm.
it's like, yeah, I know what's going on here,
Oh yeah. It's like, yeah,
yeah,
I'm grabbing my
yeah.
weed and I'm getting the hell out of here.
Yeah. Um, but now lost my train of thought where I was going with this. But um, we were talking earlier about like the safety protocol when
Hmm.
showing apartments. We were talking about um, um,
Move the mic a little bit so
oh,
it's,
okay. I'm
or
sorry.
just make sure it's facing your mouth.
Okay.
Other than that, you're
Yeah.
good.
So we were getting to the point earlier about like safety protocol when
Hmm.
showing apartments and things, and we talked about kind of how we got off on a little bit of a tangent here, but kind
Hmm.
of bring it back. We're about showing apartments after dark and not
Yeah.
doing that and documenting. One of the other things we teach our leasing agents to is to do things such as when you're in the apartment and showing, we always would flip the deadbolt lock so that the deadbolt lock would hit the door jamb.
Hmm.
Okay, now the door's not going to shut all the way.
Yep.
So God forbid if you're out in the back bedroom or there and someone's in the hallway and
Hmm.
they hear you screaming, that door didn't lock behind you, right?
Hmm.
And they can get in, right? And maybe
Yeah.
that door's open a little bit so they can hear what's going on in there, like that. So we teach them like that, flip that
Hmm.
deadbolt lock so it'll hit that door jamb and it won't close all the way.
Yeah.
We used to have a code. My first property I worked at, we would have
Hmm.
a code with each other. And so if you picture the leasing office, where over here is where the administrative offices where the leasing agents and the assistant
Hmm.
manager and property managers were. And then across the way was the maintenance director's office over
Hmm.
there. And he'd be sitting in his office and one of our leasing agents would be sitting at the table filling out that guest card that we talked about
Yeah.
earlier, right, with a prospect. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, and I'd be sitting over here on my, typing up
Hmm.
leases on the typewriter over here and doing my thing and stuff. And then the leasing agent would all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she'd yell, "Bob!" Bob was our maintenance
Hmm.
director in his office, and Bob would go, "Yeah, who's calling me? Is apartment 106 ready to show?" Now, we know what apartments are ready to show and what are
Hmm.
not ready to show. There's no reason for her to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's her cue to myself and Bob of, I'm going to go show apartment 106. I feel a little icky about this guy. One of you two come check on me in a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we still do a little like stuff like that. So
Yeah.
now I get it. Now you guys don't have this clubhouse with an
Hmm.
office and that kind of a setting, but maybe you do something like, you call your business partner and be like, "Hey, my key's not opening the door. Did you change the locks on this already?"
Hmm.
You know darn well what's going. That means drop what you're doing and get the hell over here because I'm about to go show this place to a bunch of gangbangers or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't know what's gonna happen.
Right. Just drop what you're doing and get the hell over here right now.
Hmm.
That's kind of have some sort of code
Hmm.
you got with each other like that, stuff like that. So I teach. So when we talk about leasing safety, I talk about stuff
Yeah.
like that. Make sure that you always let them go down the hallway ahead of you. You lead from behind so that they don't trap you in the bedroom or they don't trap you into that walk-in closet.
Hmm.
And when you're in the living room, you kind of dance around that living room with them, and you always make sure that you are in between them and the exit at all time.
Hmm.
Okay, so as they're walking around, they're doing one of these, and they're like, "Oh, that looks nice." You kind of dance around with them, and always make sure that you stay in between them and the exit at all times.
So you can get out if you need
Yes,
to.
yes.
Man,
So that's part of my leasing safety
Hmm.
section that I do, stuff like that. So
the stories I've heard, at least personally, with some of the different crazy scenarios that people have been in. Man, there should be a book on this. You know?
yeah, yes.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a crazy world out there. I mean, you look at a lot of this, and it's just it's absolutely absurd. And I mean, just recapping some of it, it it's about being safe. It's about just making sure that, I mean, CYA, something my grandfather always taught me
Yeah.
was cover your
Yeah.
ass,
Yeah.
and just making sure that everything that you're safe, both physically and legally,
Yeah.
financially, essentially, because you don't know what's going to happen, and we're talking about like less than 5% here. Most people are not out to get people. Most people
No,
are super cool.
but that's what
But
you're
the thing
doing.
is it is about that 1%, because
Yes.
if something happens, it takes 100 times you show a property to get a room rented, and that one time that you accidentally said
Right.
just the most menial thing that you didn't think was a problem turns into the biggest headache of your year.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, like you said, you said I could write a book about. Oh, I literally pretty much did. I put a manual together for landlords to go through on all this stuff. My next book I could probably write is, I'll title it 101 Reasons Why I Can't Pay My Rent on Time.
Okay, so what's the craziest you've heard?
Oh,
Did the aliens invade?
yeah. I mean, I this whole dog ate my homework stuff. There's a lot. I mean, yeah. I can't remember. I remember one guy told me he put he had his money order. He went to go get money orders, and his kid was playing around in the kitchen and took the money orders and threw them in the garbage disposal. And then he didn't know they were down there, and then he turned his garbage disposal on, heard something, and went in there and found the money order sitting in the garbage disposal.
Ouch.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. So so it wasn't a check where you could just cancel the check. These were money orders. So he just, and this is $700-800 or whatever it was at the time.
ouch.
So yeah, so he had to go through as a process. So obviously we were,
Yeah, and the
we were
cool thing
understanding.
is you're willing to work with people.
Yes.
That if something like that happens, it's like, come to me, tell me,
Yeah.
like don't try to hide it from me. It's like,
Yeah.
if something happens, most landlords, the biggest thing I see is, I look at, you've got a lot of people that get into it and they're like, oh well, you can't do this, we're getting you out, like you can't, and it's like,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, right. And so when you set your policies, I mean, you got to be hard and steadfast, but and make sure that you're keeping your policies the same with every person. So if you're going
Yeah.
to charge a late fee on the 6th of the month, you charge a late fee on the 6th of the month for everybody. That includes Grandma Ethel. That includes everybody. If you want to make a policy where I do one time, I waive a late fee one time for each person. If an extenuating circumstance comes in, make sure you document that, and everybody's going to get one-time late fee,
Yeah.
waived late fee. But you're going to do that. You're going to offer that with everybody if something like that happens, right? But don't make that a habit. And then make sure that if you're going to charge late fees, you charge late fees to everybody. Have a policy where you're going to say if you're more than X amount of dollars over. So if let's say
Yeah.
rent is $800 a month, and they paid you $600, they're $200 delinquent. Are you going to charge a late fee or not? I worked
Yeah.
so one of my companies, their policy was anything over $100, you got a late fee. So if you owed $120 and there was a $25 late fee, you got that $25 late fee on there, for
Yeah.
owing $120. So have a dollar amount set that you have that you're gonna do it for. Have a time, a date that you implement your late
Yeah.
fees on, and you make sure you're doing the same thing with everybody. So it may sound like you're being a stickler, but the best thing to do to keep yourself out of that doghouse when it comes to that fair housing issue is
Yeah.
you're being the same. You're keeping everything the same with everybody.
I get what you're saying. At the same time, I don't know. I guess it's
And that's the
unfair,
unfortunate,
and unfortunately,
right.
yeah, because I
That's
look
the
at,
unfortunate part about our business, is
Yeah, but
because we
there's-
want to be
yeah.
nice and we want to be understanding of them, but then there's that other part of me that says my hands are tied because I can't make exceptions for you and not someone else.
exactly. Otherwise, you're going to get
That's the
screwed.
right. And and one of the things we always teach our leasing agents is you just always could fall back on that. That look, at some point our hands are tied. That we really
Yeah.
don't have the authority to alter our rules or alter our policies because of fair housing. And you fall back on that. That's not you. That's
Yeah, but the hard part is you look at a lot of these people, and I mean, any of us could easily be in the situation
Sure.
where that's the unfortunate thing is with HUD and fair housing. you're stuck in that position where it's like somebody's like, listen,
It takes away that discretion.
exactly. I just started a new
Right,
job. It's not
right.
working. Like I had to leave my old job under very bad circumstances. I'm not getting my last paycheck. I won't get a new paycheck. This job pays more, but it won't be for another month.
Yeah.
Can you guys work with me? I'm more than happy to pay a late fee, but I need the place. And then unfortunately you got to go back to them and you're like, the government went over and just tied my hands. I can't do a damn thing.
Right.
And it's as much as, and because you know the person, they've been here for 4 years.
Right. That's what's tough about it is you gotta is
I
when it
couldn't
comes to
imagine.
fair housing, you unfortunately you gotta have policies that you put in place, and it's not just about fair housing isn't just about denying somebody housing. It's about
Yeah.
making sure you're treating your current residents, your prospective residents, all with the same yardstick, that you're treating them the same exact way.
Wow.
That's
I couldn't imagine doing that. And that's one of the reasons that I think the real estate industry is really cool. There's certain parts of it that aren't necessarily my cup of tea, but it's a lot of it though, the fact that you got to do that. Cause I look at, if I had to treat all my clients the same and abide by, okay, we've got this contract. If we vary away from this contract and you need to pay me on this day, and it's like, or we need to only do this detail, or like there's so many times they'll be like, you know what? I want to do this. I want to throw this in there because I think this is something, or they're like, well, can we do this? And it's like, yeah, let's do it. And it goes against the contract. And if I had to take in, because at the end of the day, this is the work you do. This is the industry. If I had to take and play it the same with every single client or every single
right.
potential business, I couldn't imagine a world like that.
Right, and that's so in every other industry, that's good customer service. You kind of take that. We unfortunately don't have that luxury of doing that in a lot of these situations because we have to be consistent in how we treat everybody and how we enforce our rules with everybody.
So, do you think it's a necessary evil?
I mean, there's good and bad to it, like I said. So it's a yes. Because it does help fall back on things when, it's you just always use that as they're your fall guy. You know, my hands are tied. There's not really much I can do. We have to do this with everybody. That's
man.
Right. But that's and so you got to have a little bit of kind of that side of you in this business too. That, they used to love that about me when I first came into this industry. We kind of we loved playing that good cop, bad cop thing. So I'm, when my first apartment community that I worked at, it was a huge apartment community. We had 2 swimming pools, 4 tennis courts, a sand volleyball court, half basketball court, and a huge clubhouse with a massive fitness center and a game room with ping pong tables and pool tables and dartboards and stuff in there, and a massive party room and stuff. And we would once in a while we'd have a resident party. We'd have a catered party with a live band at the pool once a year, and we have our summer party for our residents. We'd have a live band there, and we'd cater it and stuff. And it's like we'd have like a luau kind of thing for our residents. And the staff was always kind of like, they'd be out in the corner, they're having a good time, and Jim, come on over here. Come with us. We're having a good time over here. You guys have a good time. I'm keeping an eye on jerk off over here. And I was always that guy. I was always that guy that where you guys go and have a good time. I'm keeping an eye on these guys over here. Or I would be that guy where I'd be in the office and just out of the corner of my eye would see someone come in the pool with a glass bottle, and you can't have glass in the pool area, right? And I'd just pop out of my seat and just and go down to the pool and be like, and so I was always that guy over there, and they loved it because they liked playing good cop and bad cop.
And you're sitting there being bad cop.
If I had a nickel for every time someone over there told me I should have been a cop, that was, but it's one of my woulda, coulda, shouldas in life that I kick myself now when
Be a bounty hunter or something now.
but that was always, and I love that. That was when I still remember when I first came into the industry and they were training me, and one of the leasing agents looked at me and said, that's probably one of the hardest part about this business is we've got rules, and you got to have to be a stickler, and sometimes you got to go down there and play bad guy and tell them they can't do this and I'm thinking I'm going, oh, I'm going to love this. I looked at it and go, we're going to have a good time.
Oh man, we're the opposite. I look at the rules and I'm like, okay, like let's see how we can do this. Like,
Yeah, and that's one of the things that really drove me to
Hmm.
this. I'm like, oh my God, I love this. This is
Yeah.
great, because they handed that title to
Hmm.
me, a bad cop, and they said, good, you run with it, you be that guy.
Yeah.
And it was a great combination. It was.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a match made in heaven
Yeah,
right there.
yeah.
So I mean, you jump from the 500 some units all the way back to 170,
136. Yeah, yeah,
136.
yeah.
What it like it sounds like a lot of work to be managing 500 some units.
Well, but it isn't. It's not really. It's all relative to what you have there. So I mean,
Hmm.
530 units, 500 units. When you got 5 people in the office, what's the difference between you? You have 100 units and you've got one
Hmm.
person in the office,
Yeah.
right? It's all the work is split up, accordingly.
Okay.
There's just more of work. So let's just take, for example, in 136 units, I'm doing everything in the office. When you're at a 500 unit apartment
Hmm.
community, I'm not doing everything in the office.
Yeah.
There's someone who's their sole job responsibility is to sit in the back room and enter the rent in the computer and send
Hmm.
out late rent notices.
Yeah.
That's the assistant property manager. They would sit back there and they do all, and they run the delinquency, and they send out late rent notices,
Hmm.
and they enter the rent into the system, and they do all that sort of stuff. That's a full-time job for somebody.
Yeah.
Over on this, when and there would be someone who would be one of the main leasing agents, or the leasing
Hmm.
manager in the front of the office, and their sole 80% of their days and their responsibilities is just doing lease renewals,
Hmm.
sending out lease renewal notices, and then when they come back, and when the signed leases come back to the office, we make copies of the leases and send them to the door. I mean,
Hmm.
someone would have almost a full-time job just doing the lease renewals. So
Wow.
so there would be, where I'm doing a little bit of everything
Hmm.
in myself, okay. But when you're at a 500 unit or 800 unit apartment community, your job is more focused and
Hmm.
pinpoint in things,
Yeah.
right? So a great example is, if you're the property manager at a 700 unit apartment community, you are for the most part pretty much never really going to show an apartment.
Hmm.
You don't really go on showings much.
Yeah.
Okay. You have leasing agents that are
Hmm.
up front in the front of the office that do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You've got other things that you're doing in the back in your office
Hmm.
that you're taking care of. But when you're at a property manager at 136, you're doing the showings, right?
Yeah.
You're doing a little bit of everything. There's less of everything to do, but you're doing it all, right?
Yeah, because the work can't be split out.
Right, right.
So, and then what are the benefits? Because I know your job's a little bit different on the benefits end than most, as far as like your category of work.
When you see the benefits, I mean,
Like a lot of property managers at the larger level
yeah,
tend to live on property
sure.
because it's easier.
A lot of them really don't at that at that
Really?
level, right? Yeah, a lot of staff really don't.
Interesting.
Yeah, believe it or not, there's a handful that do, and more today than it was back when I first came in the business.
Okay.
But back then, a lot of the managers don't really live on site. They've got a house on the other side of town, or 20 minutes away or whatever, and they didn't really live on site. Yeah.
Huh.
When I first came there and I started as a leasing consultant, I got an apartment outside and I lived on site.
Hmm.
So I haven't driven to work in 30 years. I've
Yeah.
lived on site everywhere I live. I'm that kind of person and because I was that cop mentality like
Hmm.
that. I was always the guy that I could never get in my car and drive out of there at 6 o'clock because that property where I was at my first place, because
Hmm.
it was like that big organization kind of going on where there's the pool and the swimming pool.
Yeah.
It was like a big fun atmosphere all the time.
Hmm.
And you would have people there who would be like, oh, Jim's not here right now. Good, now we can get it right. That. So if I drove away and left, I mean, that'd be the kind of thing where they'd be like, oh, good, he's not here, right? And I know that they would be like that. So I was like, I hated not being there at that
Hmm.
time. I had to make sure I was on site. I'm nowhere near as bad as I was back then. When I was in my 20s, I'm not like that as much. I'm kind of calmed down, but we used to, for example, I'll give you an example. When we had a big clubhouse,
Yeah.
and we had a position that we would hand out to a couple residents. We had a handful, like 5 or 6 residents that lived there, and that we gave them the responsibility of what we had called clubhouse closer. And this was when the office closed at night. There would be a resident who would come there, and they would stay at the clubhouse and sit in the club room where we'd have big kitchen area and big TV in there and
Yeah.
stuff. And they would sit and watch TV, and then every half hour or so they'd get up and walk around and make sure no one's screwing around in the fitness center and make sure there's not kids running around in the sauna and stuff like that and things like that. And there's not anybody screwing around in the pool that shouldn't be there and everything. And I was, when I was a leasing agent, I actually had that role as a staff. I watched the clubhouse at night after
wow.
office hours. So I would so the office would close, and then I would go and sit in the club room and watch the clubhouse until the clubhouse closed at night, at like 10 o'clock at night, and I'd lock the clubhouse up. And there would be times, because I only do that a couple nights a week, and the other couple nights a week, the other handful of residents did this. And there would be times where you would see some of these like kids that would, you would only have to be like 18 years old in order to be in there without a parent. So you can't be in there at like 15 or 12 years old. You can't be in there. And these kids would walk in there, and it'd be like, and they'd go peek around into the club room, and they'd see me on the couch, and they'd go, "Oh, darn it. Like, Jim's there tonight, like he's working." And it's like, yeah, get out of here.
Yeah, but sometimes it's kind of fun.
But but they was always this kind of like, oh damn, Jim's working the clubhouse tonight. It's like, because they know that they're not going to get away with this crap when I was there. I was always that guy, and so but that was my mantra. I bet everybody back then used to tell me I should have been a cop, because that's just how I was. And we used to have two police officers that worked for that local police department that lived on site. And they were what we call our courtesy officers. And they were our contact to the police department, that so that if ever something was going on, they were on call, we'd call them, and they would go take care of a noise complaint. They would take care of a rowdy person at the pool, because we didn't want our maintenance guys or anybody going taking care of a noise complaint, because you knock on the door, you really don't know what's on the other side of that door. We'd rather have you, this off-duty police officer that lives here, do this stuff for us, right? And so they got to know the staff, and they got to know me. I can't tell you how many times they used to nag me. They would just shove that job application in my face and nag me. I told the chief all about you, Jim. Will you just apply? They would, to be a cop. I said, no, I want to give this, because I was still brand new in the industry.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I want to give this a shot. I really want to make something of this business and do this. I tell you, that's going to be, I'm going to take it to my grave when I woulda, coulda, shouldas. But yeah, if I had, a nickel for every time someone back then told me that, and I had it laying right in front of me, they would have let me in, and I could have been I'd be retired right now with a great pension, because that was more than 20 some years ago when they were doing that. And I think
you didn't do it.
It was. Yeah.
Man, no, it's always those things you look back, you're like, you know what?
Yeah.
Man, my life could have gone this direction. And
Yeah.
No, that's cool. So, well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time, Jim. I know it's, I appreciate you, because I know, like I said, a lot of the stuff that you talk about, I think it's useful stuff that people need to know about. And there's so much about it that's the shock and awe. It's like, okay, well, I made this many millions of dollars on real estate. It's like, well, let's take a look at the inner workings of it. And I appreciate you chatting about that and kind of giving people an insight.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You betcha. Thanks, Jim.
Good. Thank you.